The question is, what can Christians learn from world religions? The religious landscape has changed and changed dramatically. Pew Research did a study not too long ago that said just in the last decade, the number of people in the United States who identify as Christians has declined almost 10%. The group that has grown the most during that same period, none of the above. People who are not involved or participating in any particular religion. And so what that means is you can take nothing for granted. Your next door neighbor might be a Muslim. You might work side by side with a Hindu. You or your friend may be studying Wicca or Buddhism. Not so long ago, that would have been unusual. Now, not so much. So the question is, how do I love my neighbor if I don't even understand my neighbor, religiously speaking? And it's not just a matter of I don't want to say something or do something that might offend them. How do I understand what matters to them spiritually speaking? And Christians especially have another question that they have to answer, and that is, how do I love my neighbor, and yet at the same time, how do I remain faithful to the exclusive and the unique claims that Jesus made about himself? That's a good question. And all of those are questions I'm hoping to answer in this series. I've been teaching world religion classes for over 20 years now. I've been at a small college and a large university, and my students have represented the entire religious spectrum from belief to unbelief, east and west, all sorts of religions represented. But I don't approach these very important questions strictly as a professor or as an academic. Not long after I became a Christian, I went into full-time ministry. I did that for about 15 years. After that, I was a campus chaplain for about 7 years at a small Bible college. Right now, I'm an elder at my church, 10 Mile Christian Church. On occasion, I'm asked to fill in and preach. And I also am a counselor and a case manager at a homeless shelter where I work with addicts in recovery. But I don't approach these questions strictly as a minister either. These questions about how Christianity relates to other world religions, they affect me deeply and affect me personally. And I'm going to try to explain why. I became a Christian in 1980, and I made the confession then that Christians have made for over 2,000 years. I said that Jesus is Lord and that he is risen. And one of the implications of that confession is that I was putting my faith in, my trust in, that what Jesus said was true. In John 14:6, Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. I had a long talk with someone involved in the Hare Krishna movement at one time, and he was very insistent. He said, Jesus said, I am a way. In other words, one way among many ways. I had believed exactly the same thing at one time. But I've come to the conclusion that the people who knew Jesus best, the people who followed him around for those 3 years, who listened to what he said, who witnessed what he did, were right. And they got it right when they wrote down those words. That verse, John 14:6, has been a stumbling block for many people over the centuries. It was for me as well. I'm hoping what we can do as we attempt to answer those questions, we can take a closer look at why Jesus said what he did and what it means and how we can be faithful to those words, and yet at the same time how we can love our neighbors as ourselves, even our religious neighbors who believe differently than we do. Anselm of Canterbury once said, theology was faith seeking understanding. What my faith has been seeking for all of these years has been an answer to those very questions. In some sense, my entire adult life, I've been looking for ways to answer my 17-year-old self the questions that I was asking then. I hope you'll join me as we look in more detail at what Christians can learn from world religions.